Welcome to Laughter for All. It's the podcast with Comedian Nazareth.
Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Laughter for All podcast. I am Comedian Nazareth, and thank you for joining me on this wonderful Tuesday night here in dry Southern California. Yeah, it was raining last week, and it is dry and back to normal weather, which is like 70 degrees. So, thank you so much for joining us today, and let's see what's going on next week is Valentine week, so I have a couple shows in Southern California. They'll be both in the North San Diego County, California. And then on the 25th, I'm going to be in Tyler, Texas at a brand Cowboy Church. Yes, in Tyler, Texas, doing a big concert there. So 25th, Tyler, Texas, brand Cowboy Church. All right. I have a wonderful guest. I got the pleasure of meeting him a few times in Hawaii at the Increase conference, and he's just a great guy. His name is Christian Ophus, and he's the president and CEO of Emerge Publishing, which provides authors with the most comprehensive range of publishing services and options featuring award-winning creative design, all tailored to the author's specific needs and at the most competitive rates found in the industry today. So if you're an author, you want to be an author, you want to write a book, you're thinking about I have a story to tonight is your night. With over 30 years experience in marketing and branding, graphic design and strategic development, Christian's focus in developing revenue generating programs and information products for professional authors, speakers and trainers. And he's given the name America's Author Advocate. So please welcome my friend from Tulsa, Oklahoma, Christian Office, Mr. Christian,
Nazareth,
thank you for joining
it's
me.
great to see you. You just talked about Hawaii, and then I started daydreaming. Maybe we should have both booked tickets over to Hawaii and had the podcast over there. We would have had much better background
I
than
know.
that
No,
little light breeze blowing.
I like your background. You're in Tulsa,
I
Oklahoma.
am. Tulsa,
Yes.
Oklahoma, yes.
But you're a California boy, right?
I am originally, yes. I wasn't born there, but my parents moved there when I was about 9 months old and lived there through my early teen years and love it. And I actually have a daughter who lives still in Southern California, down in San Juan Capistrano area. So we get to go out and visit her a lot. And so, yeah, we love California.
How did
Wonderful,
you feel
wonderful
when
place.
your parents said that we're leaving California, we're going to Oklahoma? I'm not saying Tulsa. Tulsa's beautiful, but
Sure.
what?
Well, we actually took one detour from California. We moved up to my dad was a doctor of pharmacology, and he bought a drugstore in a really tiny little town in Oregon called Brownsville, Oregon. So my early teen years, mid-teen years, I got to be in a wonderful environment with the forest and all the trees, and just loved it. And then I'll tell you, interesting, and I hadn't even told you this yet. The reason why we moved to Oklahoma was because my dad had one night a vision, and this would have been in the early 80s. And in this vision, again, he was a pharmacist. In this vision, he saw himself working in a place that was largely gold. It seemed gold, and in his mind, he thought maybe it was heaven, but he was administering pills to people like a pharmacist would, except he was praying for them. And it
Oh,
wasn't until a couple years later when Oral Roberts announced the building of the City of Faith medical facility. And my dad said, that's the place I saw in my dream. And we sold the drugstore and we moved to Oklahoma so my dad could work at the City of Faith on the
so
Oral
you,
Roberts University campus.
so you grew up in a Christian home.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not only did I grow up in a Christian home, both sides of our family were ministers. My grandmother on my mother's side was a traveling evangelist. And boy, sometime we could have conversations about that. But back in the early days, they would go from town to town and start singing on the street corner and get people to come to an evening meeting. And then they started doing tent crusades. She was known as the girl evangelist. So in her teens, she traveled with a huge crew and all of this tent, like what Robert's, similar idea. And
Mm.
so she was very involved, and she's in the Hall of Fame for the Assemblies of God churches. Yeah, so we have a lot of spiritual heritage and ministry heritage on both sides of our family.
But were you always a Christian? Was there a moment where you just say, I'm done. I don't believe I want to own it myself?
Yeah, honestly, I would say I was one of those exceptions where I grew up in a very strong Christian home and we loved it. Christianity and spirituality were a very, very big part of our lives. But what's interesting is when you get to certain points in your life, you start to change and you take what was your parents' religion, that basically you were part of, and it does become yours. I would say that one of the biggest challenges that I face, and there's probably some people watching this, if they've been Christian for a long time, they might feel the same way. But I always felt like because I was around it so much, after a while, it sort of just becomes normal. And I used to see people who would first come to Christ and they were so excited and it would so radically change their life. And I had been a part of that for such a long time. I didn't feel that same level of excitement,
Mm.
so but basically, yes, we're just our family is very blessed. God has taken care of our family, and so yeah, so we're doing good.
Are your kids the same way? Are they same thing that happened to you, or they had their moments?
Yes, our family, well, all of our family. We can talk more about some of that because we have my father-in-law. Many people may know is Bob Harrison, which Nazareth is a longtime friend,
I've
and we
had
have a
him on
lot
the
of
podcast. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So we're a lot of common friends there. But yes, all four of our kids, we raised them in a Christian school, and uh, two of them graduated ORU, just like I did. I graduated ORU in 1990,
Uh,
and the two of them played volleyball on full ride scholarships. Thank God for full ride scholarships. All of our three girls were volleyball girls, and so they all worked their way through college playing sports. So yeah, and
so
then we have 10 grandchildren actually.
already,
Um, yeah, grandchild number 10 was born the day before Christmas Eve, and then we have one more in about a month. It'll be grandchild number 11. So they're everything to me, Nazareth. I just we were a close family with our kids, and just I'm very blessed to be able to spend a lot of time with our grandkids and be a part of their lives. So yeah, family's a big deal to us.
now when boys were little, like they either play with a fire truck or a police car. Did you have a
Mhm.
book and you thought you're gonna be a publisher one day, or that wasn't? What did you want
Yeah,
to
no,
do?
I wouldn't have said that. I've often joked about this before because I remember once or twice, first or second grade, that age where they are like in school, what do you want to be? And I think I said a brain surgeon, which I don't know why I would have said that, maybe to try to sound like that was impressive. Who knows? But yeah, my foray into publishing actually started when I started working with my father-in-law, Bob Harrison, before I had even graduated ORU. Got married when I was a sophomore, and so my wife and I both worked in the ministry for many years. She and I, for many years, from about '87 on, were very instrumental. The Hawaii Increase event was our baby. That was our project. So for many
Wow.
years, Michelle and I did a lot with that. And but anyway, what was interesting is my father-in-law is in the success motivational space where you not just travel and itinerant, speak in churches, but also in large arenas and different seminars and things like that. And it was interesting because boy, that's where I really feel like I started getting some of my education and really understanding how the world works.
Mhm.
But because we worked together in the ministry, I was always having to deal with, oh, okay, we got to do this brochure. Let's find an artist. How are we going to get the artist to do this? And it takes weeks. And finally, I just said, I'm going to learn this myself. So my foray into publishing started out in the area of graphic design.
Mm.
So I have, man, who knows how many book covers and information products that we've done over the years. I think our book count is right at about 1,100 titles that we've published through our company over the years. And a lot of those are, we've been very blessed to be able to work with just some amazing, ministers, a lot of authors that people would know, and also be able to work with a lot of new authors, people who are like, hey, I feel to write this book. I don't really know what to do, and that's a unique opportunity because I can come in and be able to help extract the vision. What is it you're wanting to accomplish here? What is it we're working with, and really be able to help them, bring that book into reality. And because books are powerful, and I know that your whole background behind you right there is all books.
Yeah,
And
two of them
think
are
about how
mine.
much. Yeah, yeah, that's right. So that was kind of, to answer your question, that was my foray into publishing. Really was on the graphic side to begin with. So.
Now, as a Christian, when you think of book publishing, you're thinking of the two big, the Zandrovan and Thomas Nilsson.
Mhm.
Is there the room for other publishers, smaller publishers, to even play in the field, or is just
Sure. Yeah, so it kind of depends upon who you talk to, because some people have a different context or a different background when it comes to publishing. What most people, I think, that don't know a whole lot about how publishing works is they think of the main publishers, Thomas Nelson or Zondervan on the Christian side, of course, Time Warner, and all the different big titles that are out there. But really, over about the last 15, 20 years, Nazareth, there has been a massive shift. I can't even overstate it enough. That has really changed the industry, where it used to be that these traditional publishers were in many ways sort of the gatekeepers. They were the ones that kind of made the decision. Okay, well, this book is worthwhile. Let's promote this, and so with the advent of self-publishing now, there came this opportunity for people who may not have had the platform as an author, or the notoriety, to be able to get their book published and be able to market it itself. So our company really is not a traditional publisher. We're what is called a hybrid, and what that means is we have the same distribution and the same reach as, say, a traditional publisher would have, but we also work more directly with an author, and so it's a completely different model, where the traditional side, you might be able to make a royalty, but in most cases, when you sign with a traditional publisher, you're also signing that content away to them. The publisher becomes the owner of that content. And Nazareth, if I was going to be completely honest, I can't even tell you how many times I've gotten phone calls from friends or people that I've worked with who said, "Hey, is there any way you could look at my contract and help me get my rights back? Because I did this book, it really didn't sell much. The publisher offered all this stuff, and it just didn't happen. And now I want to do an online seminar, or I want to do a variation of that book, and I can't do it because I don't own the content anymore." And so that was really the foundational reason why we started Emerge. So that part. The other part is because of working in the success and motivational space, we were working with a lot of authors who were like, "Hey, part of my income and my livelihood when I go speak is to be able to have back of the room sales,
Right.
where I speak, people love me. They can, while they're leaving, go and buy a book or an audio series or whatever they're going to do." And so that whole industry doesn't work well with the traditional publishing model, because it's all away from that. It's away from that model, if that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense, and that's why they call you America's author advocate. You're fighting for, because I remember the days
Mhm.
when I wrote three books, and the first one was, actually all three of them were, no, one was published by a publisher, but then they were asking, like, if I want to buy a copy, I have to pay $7-8, and
Mhm.
you can sell it, what, $15 max. So it wasn't making a lot of money, but I like that. Now, let me ask you this question, and
Mhm.
this is something you teach a course on. It's like, some people say, "Hey, I can make your book go become a bestseller," and some pastors say that. They said, "Okay," they tell their congregation, "Don't go buy the book today at this
Mhm.
time, and boom, it will be bestseller." What is your thoughts on that? Can you trick
Mhm.
your way to bestselling?
Well, I think over time there have been opportunities for it, but I think what people need to understand is, you know, the publishing game as it is now is really largely controlled by Amazon, and there's obviously nothing wrong with that. Most of us are selling our books on Amazon, and buying products. Amazon is a big part of all of our lives, and so that's wonderful, because it is a way for you to be able to put your book out. And nowadays we even do extended distribution through Amazon, where we're in like 13 or 14 countries, and you can even have your book physically, a print copy, sold in South Korea or Australia. So this isn't in any way to down that system, but Amazon has changed the way the things work. What was your original question? Because I want to answer it.
The
I want
question
to make
is
sure.
like, how can it be a bestseller? There's ways or tricks other than like,
Yeah.
wow, this is a huge book.
Right. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I forgot what your original question was. I got excited about it.
It's okay.
So
I want you to be excited.
yeah. So there is a lot of it's very much a cat and mouse game. We work with Ingram, and we also work with Anchor Books, and then of course with Amazon. The biggest challenge that we have, Nazareth, is Amazon doesn't provide a whole lot of data or any kind of feedback to us. We don't really even know where a book is sold. So there's some challenges there. So everybody's always trying to find a way to get your book to kick up a little bit higher on the search list and all these different things. And there are things that I think work, but it very much is a cat and mouse game, because there's been many times we have told an author, well, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do, set up the bisect codes in this particular way, and then it seems to not work right. So it almost seems like Amazon's trying to keep everything as organic as possible, for organic searches. But in reality, I don't even know how many books, Nazareth, there is on Amazon. I'm sure it's hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And if you think about it, when you go to Amazon, there's one little search bar at the top. So let's just say somebody was going to try to find your book, but they couldn't remember your name. Well, what keyword could you possibly come up with, or even multiple keywords that would perfectly tell Amazon, oh, this is what they're after? So there is some challenges there. So that's why, there's a lot of other strategies that we try to encourage authors with. And one of those is to really try to make it less about trying to trick things on Amazon, but really just start to build a national platform. If you have a message, if you feel this is something that I want to do and invest my time and my money because I want to help people with this message, then the natural thing to do is to develop out an author platform where people can know who you are and make connection with you. And so there's all the tricks with social media, but when I think it really comes down to it, I think it's really just saying, my goal is to help people. I want to do it in this particular area, and so I'm just going to start moving that direction. I say oftentimes that the book is not really the product; the author is really the product. And that may not seem too profound, but if you really start to think about it and change how you approach your products and the things that you're doing, it makes a big difference.
Right. You said in that how to make your book a bestseller before you've written the first word,
Mm-hmm.
and it says here, how to become an author pro. What is an author pro?
Yeah, an author pro. That's a good question. So that's a term that I sort of coined because when you, over many years, when you're dealing with different authors, you have some authors that come in and their book is a little bit more developed. It's a little bit more thought out, and a lot of times, again, these people who are writing these books are also speaking. They might be on a speaking circuit, or they're doing some of that type of stuff. So what an author pro is we many times will help authors who they've never done this before. They don't really have any idea, and so sometimes we're doing their first book, and it's a real learning experience. So what an author pro is if you look at a lot of the professional authors out there, they don't do things the same way that first-time authors do. And so what I have found is any time when I can get a relationship or get involved with an author before they've written the book, then we can take a look at some foundational things, because it's those foundational things that are what are really going to make that book a bestseller.
Okay, and so we talked about developing your own platform and finding the author's tribe. I mean, I can understand, like for me personally, like being a comedian, I have a fan base that would buy the book, but after my shows, they would buy it. On Amazon, nothing. Once in a while, you sell like 5 or 10 books at most. But so now let's see. Someone is watching. They go, "I'm not an author. I'm not a speaker. I'm not a pastor, but there's a story in my heart that I want to I want to write. How do they start? What is their first step?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. Well, okay, so let's talk for just a second about the author being the product, and the book is really a vehicle for you to deliver whatever that content or that message is. So when you're looking at developing out yourself as an author, one of the best concepts that I have that I often share with authors is this idea of building something called the right to be heard. And let me explain what that really means, because it may not be what you're thinking.
Mm,
Um, you know, we have two different. Over the years, I've worked with two different types of authors that are doing books. You have authors who, and they may even be popular, they may even be on a speaking circuit, but when you look at the content of their book, it's a lot of it is just very similar to another book, or maybe 10 books or 100 books that are written out
mm,
there. You think about success keys. Well, there's really only so many success keys, and we all have learned them over time. So why are we not all doing them? Well, there's ways that you can write stories and use anecdotes and things to sell it. But this idea of right to be heard. Let me give you this example. I helped a guy by the name of Lee Cockrell, who is a success motivational trainer and teacher. He was the vice president of Walt Disney World, or the vice president of Disney over all of the Walt Disney World resorts.
wow.
So for 13 years. So in his tenure as a vice president over all of the Orlando World resorts, he had 40,000 employees underneath him. That's who he was responsible for. And for 13 years, he managed all of those people and all of those parks and all of those hotels with a little tiny box. Remember the pocket daytimers that were just barely
Yeah.
would fit inside your suit coat?
Yeah.
He managed all of those people using a pocket daytimer. So
Wow.
he had really honed his skills in the area of time management. So he wrote a book called Time Management. It's one of the best books that we ever published, from a volume standpoint. And here's the reason why, is because people understood he had earned the right to be heard on the subject of time management because of what he had lived.
Mm,
So sometimes we have people who have books that, it's the same 5 or 7 success principles, but then sometimes you'll have somebody who's telling a story of something that they've been through. And Nazareth, when you're talking to people, you can tell when somebody's been through it. You can
right.
tell when somebody has been through the fire and they came out the other end, and they have a story to tell, and they have principles that they put into their life that cause them to be able to experience success. And when that happens, that's when that message gets inside of people and they feel it burning and they think about it all the time. And so there's probably a lot of people listening that have had that experience, but then they don't really know what to do. So there are, many ways to publish books. Obviously, there's all kinds of ways. I mean, you could actually use the tools that are provided in Amazon by itself to do it. But many times those books don't have the same professional look. They're not formatted and typeset in a professional way. And whatever anybody says, Nazareth, everybody does judge books by their cover.
Right.
So it's very important that you have a cover that reflects the idea, that connects with the reader, that has the right messaging to be able to get them to go, okay, I'm going to buy that book. That sounds good.
So what I'm hearing, maybe I'm hearing this correctly. Would you encourage just traditional publishing than self-publishing?
Well, traditional publishing is not the easiest thing in the world to get anymore. Generally speaking, of course, and there's probably always exceptions to every rule, but generally speaking, traditional publishers are not going to write a contract and take a book from somebody unless that author already has a significant following of people. That's why your tribe is so important. If you have somebody who, like you, has some extensive podcast or some television show, and they already have a lot of reach, well,
Right.
then that's a risk that publisher is willing to take. They're saying, hey, we're going to spend $40,000 or $50,000 producing this book. How are we going to recoup this money? Is he on television? Is he on radio? So I mean, unless it's something that is just so exceptionally well written and it fits, like a glove with where people are at, it is hard to get traditional publishing deals nowadays. And many times you have to get an agent, and then you have to do a lot of this other development work, and you might go 2 or 3 years, before you could get someone to pick it up. In In self-publishing, you're kind of on your own. You're going to have a much larger learning curve because you got to figure out how am I doing all these pieces and how do I edit it and who's going to handle the typeset and all these other things. So that's where someone like Emerge comes in. We're a hybrid. We're a hybrid between both of those two things. We're going to get you the same distribution that you would have with a traditional publisher, but we're going to hold your hand and help you walk through that process, so that you're not on your own.
So you guys will help with all of that, from design to then to finding, putting it in the distribution centers and all that. I have a
Right.
question from Alan
Sure.
Goodwin. He said, "Any thoughts on the TBN business group that is trying to combat some of the items you just listed?"
I'm not sure what he's specifically talking about, but
Um,
yeah, Trinity Broadcasting Network, and in fact, I'm longtime friends, 30 plus, 35 plus years, friends with the main person who has developed a lot of that with the TBN system. But hey, TBN's a ministry, and so what they're doing is that they're looking at this saying, hey, we want to provide as much as we can to help ministers to be able to get their message out. So it's you just have to find what's right for you. I mean, maybe that there's certain people that's a good fit. If there's an opportunity to be able to do some promotion, through TBN, or be able to get some exposure that way, that might be something that you should consider doing. So there's going to be pros and cons to all of the different options that are out there. Yeah.
Yeah, they said they have a publishing arm they have
Hmm.
been pushing on air recently. Yes. This is funny, and I have to say this, like, focus on the family. I mean, if you publish your book through them, you'll be on the show. If
Yeah.
you
Right.
don't,
Right.
you don't have a big
Right.
chance of doing it.
Yeah.
So, no, okay, let's say I have the credibility, for example. I have the idea. Okay, how do I start? What do I start? How do I write? What do I
Hmm.
write? Do you put your best ideas in the front because people don't read the entire book? What is
Right.
your
Yes.
what do you
That was
tell
very.
someone who's a novice?
Yes, we should talk about that, what you just mentioned a minute ago. But yeah, so generally speaking, the approach that I take, for somebody who's not really done a lot of writing, you're not a quote writer, which, generally speaking, I'm not a writer. I'm not a traditionally trained writer. Now I can do a lot of editing and things like that. But yeah, so the thing that I try to encourage people is you have to kind of decide ahead of time, what is the end game that I want to happen here? Because every book is a journey. You have to see a book as a journey, and you're going to build something where people who may not know who you are, or some people who do know, they're going to drop into this book on chapter one, and we're walking them down this path. It's a journey, and so we have to kind of decide ahead of time, where is it we want to end up? What is it we want to? What's the end game for this book? Are we trying to help them build their faith in a particular area, or some people, like there's a lot of business people, entrepreneurs, who write books because it allows them to be able to pass on more of their expertise and sort of position themselves as a thought leader, and that's something that can help them in their other business. Where they're not
Mm,
looking at a book as, oh well, how many copies am I going to sell and how much money I'm going to make off of a book. Unless you're a professional writer, that's not really normally the objective of books. People are using it as a means to an end. So that's one thing that I would say. But yeah, so here's what I would suggest for people is, for those of you who went to college or even high school, you will probably remember this process when you got to your senior paper, where the teacher or professor would say, okay, we want you to choose your topic, and then we want you to write a rough outline. Do you remember that? Or did you ever go through that
right.
process?
Yeah.
And then, so you might have a week or two to work on this rough outline. And then once you have the rough outline, then you turn that in and that gets approved. And then they say, okay, now let's start to fine tune that. Okay, let's fine tune that outline. Exactly what are our major points? And then once you've done that, what I would recommend is to take each of those major points and go, all right, what are the main keys that I want to make with this particular point? And then many times the very next question that I'll ask somebody is tell me a story of something that happened in your life that we can use as an illustration for that particular point. Because any books that have stories that help you anchor the principle, those are always going to be the most effective. People remember stories, and they will remember the point you're making based upon the story you tell. So stories are very important. But ultimately, we're going to build this outline, and then we're going to start breaking it down to, okay, in this chapter, here's my main 3 points. What stories could I use to illustrate these points? And I recommend to authors to really walk through that process and flush out the entire idea before you start writing. Because what will happen if you don't do that, you will have the blinking cursor syndrome, where basically you sit down to write and the cursor is blinking, and you're like, okay, well, I know it's in my head. How do I get this out? I don't know, what to do here. Well, if you've done this outline and you know what your end game is, and you know the journey that you're walking these people on, then when you sit down to write, you can say, okay, I can sit down and write the story of the time that I was, and then you break it into pieces and you write those little chunks of pieces over time. And then you can come back after you have those pieces written and put your transitions in, and be able to edit from there. So that is a really tried and true process, Nazareth, that I recommend for people.
Now, is there's an app or a system that go, hey, this is how it will help you write a book and chapters and everything? Is there's apps out there other than Word, Microsoft Word?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because just this week, and I know it seems to, in this collective consciousness now, I'm seeing in the news and the media, people talking about, artificial intelligence, AI.
Yes.
And just a few days ago, I was on the phone with a good friend of mine, longtime marketing friend out of Philadelphia. And he said, hey, have you got into this chat GPT thing? And, I told him the accounts that I had, and I had done some research on it because I knew this was something that was going to dramatically impact the publishing world. And so he said, hey, let me just take a minute and let me show you some screen captures of what we did when we went to this open or, chat GPT, open AI type approach. And what they did, Nazareth, was they basically said, okay, I am a realtor and I am in this size of a city, and tell me all of the different ways that I can help my clients to be able to more effectively sell their home. Give me 10 things. And in just a few minutes after they gave this initial, parameters, here come 10 things. And I mean, Nazareth, it was beautiful. It was like number one, and all 10 of them were fantastic. So then what he did was he said, okay, let's go through each one of these and let's get a little bit more specific. So for each individual point, he requested to the AI, tell me more specifically about these things. And as he was doing it, the chapters just kept growing and all of the sections kept growing. And he had 35,000 words within just a matter of whatever their time length is. I mean, it would have been a short period of time. He didn't tell me exactly the amount of time. But that is something that is absolutely coming, and it is coming full steam ahead, not just for publishing, but really in almost every area of our lives. The amount of copy that is going to, in the near future, be generated on social media. Of course, I think social media already has a lot of bots and things that generate copy. But what you're going to end up with is people are going to start using AI to generate all of this content on the internet, and it's going to be unlimited amounts of content, and none of it was even written by a human. So it's coming. AI is going to have a lot of positives to it. I saw an article where the CEO for I think it was ChatGPT. I think it was. I'm not positive who the CEO was. And he said he believes that artificial intelligence is going to break capitalism. And I was like, well, that's a pretty big statement to say it's going to break capitalism. But it lets you know that, you think about how much, Nazareth, that the internet meant to us when it first came. And, it was over a multiple years that it kind of developed. And, back in the day we had, and then Google came, and, what Google did for us. AI is coming just as big, if not more, with a fury, and it's coming fast.
Wow. So you think that people will start making books just based on, Chat GPT
Yes.
and then
I do think people will do that, but I don't think that those books are ultimately going to be what sells, because, I've mentioned even once or twice here, as we've talked about, people that tend to put books out and all they're really doing is rehashing the same information that they read from other people's books. and trying to put a different spin on it. So, so the books that really get traction are the books where people go, wow, now that's something I hadn't heard of before, or because of this guy's experience, I'm connecting with him and I'm feeling faith to be able to walk through this difficulty I
Mhm.
have because I read this book and he did the same thing. So I wouldn't, I'm not talking about this to say everybody go out to Chat GPT and write your book, because it's probably not going to sell. Books sell when it has an impact on the reader. I remember years ago, there was a group called ECPA, Evangelical Christian Publishing Association. It was ECPA, put a study out, and the study, one of the things that they had in there was how many, the poll that they had done was how many, who recommends, when you buy a book, how are you buying it? And
Mm.
50% of the people said their book purchase was based upon a personal recommendation. So, it's different when you go through the store and you see books and you're looking at covers versus when you're sitting down with a friend face to face and they say to you, you know what, I started this book, Nazareth. This book is incredible. This guy's story, oh my goodness, it was wonderful. That is an organic referral, and that is the way to basically have a long-term success in publishing. But that means you have to be, writing something that people are willing to talk about, you know.
Mm.
So not every book idea probably should, see the light of day, because again, they're not unique. I mean, is it really, who are you exactly targeting with this book? What's exactly your message? Is this something that's not available, somewhere else? So yeah, there's a lot of considerations there.
And there's no plagiarism in that GPT.
I don't know the answer to that. That's a great question. I think that's one of the first questions that need to be answered, because it's being generated from somewhere. But from a lot of what I've seen, it's the AI is, this huge amalgamation of grabbing information, from different places. So I don't know that plagiarism is really what's going to be the main issue there.
Mm.
Because how do you know if it's been plagiarized? They have plagiarism checkers now, where you can, universities use this to make sure the kids aren't buying term papers off the internet. So there's already plagiarism checkers. But if this is written by an AI, I mean, unless they're actually copying and pasting from somewhere, I don't know that it would be caught in a plagiarism checker. In some ways, it is original content.
It's funny how I thought this is only for nonfiction, but my daughter, my 15-year-old daughter, went to Chat GPT and she put, she loves Richard Riordan books,
Hmm.
Percy Jackson, and she
Sure.
said, Richard Riordan's writing Star Wars. And he gave her stories with
Isn't that
characters from
amazing?
Star Wars. And she's like, Dad, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And she's reading. I'm going, what happened? What's going on?
Hmm.
Now, would you take an author who does fiction? Or
Yeah. So, my background originally wasn't as much in fiction, but yes, we have done several fiction projects. Where just this last year we did a fiction book called The Color of Miracles, by an Academy Award-winning filmmaker by the name of Keith Merrill, and that book did really well. This year we just published one called All God's Stepchildren, and that's a completely futuristic. It has Christian undertones to it, and the storyline and things, but it's a futuristic dystopian type fiction piece. So yeah, we do fiction as well. But the rules, if I could say it this way, Nazareth, the rules for the end game for a fiction writer are different than a nonfiction writer. Because if you're a fiction writer, most of the time you don't have something else that you have to offer that person when they buy your book, in the same way that a nonfiction author would. you know,
Mm,
let's just say a nonfiction author puts a book out that talks about something that's their specialty. Let's talk about time management. Well, they may be putting that book out as a lead generator to be able to tell people, hey, I'm here and I do time management seminars, or I have online courses.
mm,
So many times nowadays with nonfiction, books are being used to monetize other aspects of business in other different
mm.
ways. It's not just for the sake of the book. Fiction is a different deal, because you are definitely going to have to go the route of building a tribe. You build a tribe of people who have read your books and they know and love you and they follow you and they'll do anything for you. It's a completely different approach
Now, what
for
is a
marketing,
hot
at least.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What is a hot topic right now that people say, that you say, hey, if someone comes to you and said, I'm writing on this topic, you go,
Mhm.
yes, this is hot. People want to hear. What is the hottest topics right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not even sure if I know exactly what that is. I'll have to think about that. But I will tell you this. You brought up a point that I think is very interesting because one of the other things that I think people need to do when they're considering writing a book is to do some research. You know,
Mm,
over the years, I've started many companies that we have done, very well with. And what is it you do when you're starting a company? You go, well, let's go research and let's see what other companies are out there. What is their product offering? What are their price points? Who are they really trying to target here? And by doing some research and kind of getting a lay of the land, what's out there, that allows a prospective business person to say, you know what, I think we can find a niche here that somebody's not adequately serving. And books
mm,
are the same way. If someone came to me and said, I want to write a book on leadership, I would tell them, well, I wouldn't waste the time because you have guys like John Maxwell who've written who knows how many books on leadership. And so it would be very difficult for you to even be on the first 10 pages of search results on Amazon if the only keyword you were using was leadership. So
mm,
how do you do that? You might research it and say, okay, well, I'm talking about leadership in local government when you're a Christian, or I'm talking about this particular niche aspect of a
mm.
much larger, topic. So I highly encourage people to get online. If you have a book that you want to write on a particular topic, go search it on Amazon. And when we do work with authors, we walk through that process and we see, what books have been published in the last year or two. Now there might be 5 or 10 books that were published in the 80s, or the 90s. And because those books are so much older, many times they're not in print or they're just not as relevant. So they're just because books were written 10 or 15 years ago on a subject wouldn't be a reason why I would tell somebody don't write on that subject. But there's a lot of things you can look at. Is there a specific niche that you could target in a given space? And sometimes it might be, hey, there's a bunch of books on this particular subject, but they're all expensive. Well, what if you did a shorter version of a book and had a lower price point? There's a market many times in price points as well.
Mm.
So research is a big deal. Any amount of time that you spend researching is money well spent when you're, considering a book that you're writing.
Paper copy or hard copy, or hardcover or paper cover. What's better?
Yes. So, so if you're a person who is trying to sell a book primarily through the traditional distribution channels, Amazon, or even if it's an independent bookstores, wherever you're trying to do that, paperbacks tend to sell better. A lot of guys that are in the world of finance or people who do success and motivational speaking, they'll many times have a hardcover book. One, because it's a little bit higher price point, and they're typically selling those in the back of the room sales type approach. But it just depends because the general rule of thumb is if you go into a Books a Million today or Barnes and Noble, you go to the fiction section, almost probably close to 100% of those books are going to be paperback because most people, when they read a book, a fiction book, they only read it once. This
Mm,
isn't a book I'm going to read 5 times. Now, if it's a book that's something specific on a particular approach or training or business, or even science, that might be a book that you read multiple times over. And so, the general idea is we do hardcovers for books that you're going to keep on your shelf for years to come and keep referencing over time.
mm,
So, there's economics to it as well. Obviously, if you're a first time author, it's harder to sell a $24 or $25 hardcover book than it is to sell a $14 or $15 paperback. So, there's the economics involved in it too. You just have to kind of walk through these decisions. But again, that's what goes back to this. You should really know what your end game is and then know where you're starting and then just build a logical path that will
mm.
accomplish and get you to your end result.
What's the minimum word count or page count to be able
Mhm.
to get a book out?
Boy, again, that depends because, I'll tell you. You mentioned earlier the idea of the, do you try to front load your book? We should talk about that as well because there have been some interesting statistics that have been done over the past few years, and what they're finding out is the actual number of people, the percentage of people who purchase a book and read it from cover to cover is actually a very small percentage. It is not a big number. It might be 12, 15% of the people.
Wow.
And then there is a percentage of people who buy the book, especially if it's in if they're needing, if they're going to a book signing or, a back of the room sales where they may buy the book and they might thumb through the first 2 pages, but they never even read the book. So there's a percentage of that as well. And you just have to understand that it is what it is. So all that to say is one of the things that people, as a strategy that they've started doing when you're doing a nonfiction book, is something called front loading. And the idea of front loading is basically to just make sure that in the first 100 pages of your book that you're giving enough meat and information, because a lot of what they're finding out is the largest section of people, I didn't tell you that part, the largest section of people, percentage of people who buy a book will read the first 100 pages, and that's as far as they go.
That's gold.
So there's the 100-page rule. Yeah. So that's one thing. And then you asked again about, what was the word count.
Yeah.
And the word count is going to definitely depend upon, the how deep you're drilling down on a particular subject or how much you're wanting to, accomplish. I mean, when I was at Harrison House for a few years, I worked with Harrison House Publishing, which, back in the heyday, they were $60 million a year in Christian book sales. And, but we had an author, Rick Renner, that I published a couple books for, and he had a book called Sparkling Gems. And I think it was 700 or 800 pages, and it was hardcover. And I don't even remember the price point, but the subject that he was treating and what it was different Hebrew and Greek things that came from the Bible. It's a great book, by the way, for a reference. It was 700 or 800 pages. And so the right demographic of person is like, that's the book I want. You could sell them an 800-page book. When it comes to fiction, let's talk word count for a second. So that book, the fiction book that we did, that was 499 pages. It was the Color Miracles, was 126,000 words, I think is what it was. So fiction, it can be much longer. The other fiction book I mentioned was only 35,000 words. So it was just a little bit different approach. But I mean, if you're trying to cover a significant subject and really trying to drill down, 50 to 60,000 is a good size for a book. It has a good feel to it. And that is something that is actually important. You want a book that feels thick enough so that it feels like, okay, well, this book is effectively treating this subject that I want to read about. And so we have little things that we do, but we try to get our books right now. I think the sweet spot for books is about 176 pages, maybe between 176 and 200 pages. And so that tends to be, and again, this is, publishing, when they talk shop, you hear these words. That's not coming from end readers. It's coming from, people in the industry who track this sort of thing.
Now, can you, let's say someone listening or watching, they've already had a book that they self-published, but that was a few years ago. Can they resubmit it to you guys, and you guys can put it back on the market and distribute it?
Yeah, that can be done. In one of the books that I mentioned, the fiction book, that was something we actually did on that second book. It had been initially published, but it wasn't done right. And I don't know if it was a timing thing or what exactly the deal was, but they felt like, hey, we need to, be working with somebody who can not just, put the book together physically, but what is this going to look like, and how do we follow this marketing path, and walk it out. So we do that. But I would definitely ask a few questions that, because you would want to find out pretty quickly if there was an effective marketing done on it. Why didn't the book get traction? So we might want to look at it and go, okay, maybe we should restructure this. Maybe you should shorten this book. Maybe it just was, I have another book right now that we're doing, and I can't even talk about it yet. I'm very excited to at some point. It's been a 3-year project, but the author, his English is not his native language. And so it's a very specific, it's a biography. And so a lot of what we've had to do is say, okay, well, let's take your content now and let's have it rewritten so that it's an easier read for the average, English speaking person. Because
Mhm.
otherwise, and I'm sure you've probably had this happen before, where you buy a book and the sentence structure doesn't flow very well, and you just kind of feel like you have this machete and you're having to hack through the jungle of this book just to get through it. And obviously you're not going to get someone to read a book cover to cover if it's a difficult read. So
Right.
editing is very important. And and also, I mean, we've dealt with people before who have had ghostwriters write their book, because that is an option.
Mm.
It tends to be pretty expensive, if you have a good one. But the ghostwriter didn't really do the best job writing in the author's voice. If you understand what I'm saying when I say that, I can read something and I can go, oh, that's Malcolm Gladwell. If you handed me a page and it happened to be somebody that I know and love, Malcolm Gladwell, somebody who I pretty much love everything he's ever written, I can hear his voice in it. And so you have to be able to find somebody who has the ability to help ghostwrite in your voice. So yeah, a lot of ins and outs like that. So we have a lot of people that contact us to just get some advice. What do I do here? How should I approach this? So every book's different. Every topic's different. Every author's different.
Wow. Do you think humor books sell still?
Well, I love humor. I'm a big humor person. If you got into my car right now, all of the Sirius XM buttons would be all the comedy channels.
Yeah.
I love comedy. I love stand-up comedy. I have guys that I've followed for the years. I love the stuff that you do, Nazareth. If you have people who are watching your show who have not gotten your books and listened to some of your comedy, they need to just stop what they're doing and go do it, because the one thing I love about you is it's just all very original. I don't feel like you're doing the same thing that I hear other people do. But I love humor. But again, humor is not for everybody. So you have to be able to identify who are those people that really want that that book, and then you market to them specifically in that way.
Now, how many books a month do you read?
Yeah. So I obviously I have to read for my career, for what I do. But
Right.
the dirtiest little secret is I don't actually care to read for my own enjoyment. I love Audible. I am a big audiobook consumer.
Right here.
I
I'm a slow
Yeah.
reader.
So every month I'm at least getting 3 extra credits. When you have to buy from for those
Yeah,
people
you
who
get
know
one
what
free and
Amazon
you
is.
buy two
Yeah,
more.
yeah, you buy 2 or 3 more. So I'm a huge consumer of audiobooks. That's how it's how I absorb. It's how I retain better. I must be better from listening than I am from reading.
I'm just like you.
So
I
yeah.
can listen to a book and my wife goes, "How many books did you read this month?" I go, "3." Audiobooks. I
Or
can I'm a slow reader, but I love listening to
yeah.
audiobooks. So let me ask you this. You've
Mhm.
read a lot of books, you've listened to a lot of books, you've had successful businesses, you're a good father, you're a good husband, you're a good grandpa. I've been with you. I love you. What do you say to someone, right? You don't even know who they are. They're probably listening or watching, and you want to lift them up a little bit. What do you say to
Mm.
them?
Yeah. So I do know what that feeling is like when you get a message or something that has happened in your life. I know there have been things that I've gone through in my life that were challenges and they seemed insurmountable. And most people, I would say, have had that experience. And so what ends up happening is they persevere, they find a way to push through it, they find a solution, and coming out the backside, they want to share it with people. They want to be able to share, because it worked for me and I want to help you. So that actually is many times what drives a lot of people to write. I will tell you this: if your goal is I want to write a book because I want to become popular or famous, I think you will have a very frustrating time with it. The people who really end up doing well, I believe that write books, are people who have a passion about it, and they don't know what they're going to do with themselves if they don't do it. And
Mm.
so what I would say is treat it like a business. Start doing some research, and if you feel like your writing is weak, maybe find that, there's all kinds of writing classes. The internet is just filled with groups of people who want to help each other. So it might be writing, it might be, a particular topic, or it might be something where, you're feeling like, hey, I feel this need, or I feel a burden for this particular message to be able to get that out. I think the idea is to start moving towards it. Every writer wrote a first book, and every writer who is world famous now, I promise you, had some stuff that they wrote that was horrible. So you can't go by, well, I wrote something and it's awful. Do some of these things we're talking about here, where you can, start to do some research. If there's a topic you're passionate about, it start writing out, what would an outline look like? What stories would I tell? If I was gonna write a book, and start working towards it, because anytime, Nazareth, that you take action towards something, that's when doors start to open. It's very rare when doors open first and then you go, oh, well, there's an open door, maybe I should walk through it. It more comes from taking action and moving towards something. And so I would just tell people, if that's you, if you feel like, man, I've had something that's been burning, on my heart, and you have the means to be able to do it, if you have the time and energy to be able to develop, to do it, move towards it.
Okay, let me talk to Chris, not the publisher,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
but the Christian man, the human, the father, the husband, the grandpa. Encourage someone right now. Probably will never write a word, but
Yeah.
encourage them a little bit in this time.
Yeah. So it'll tie into this, because over the last several years, and we're in our world, we're in a weird place right now. I don't know if a lot of people have felt that, but coming off the backside of COVID, which was such a shock to how everything was being done, and then we're moving into unstable political. There's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of things like that where people have a concern, and so the one thing that I love about authors is most of the time they're wanting to serve others with this message. And what I would encourage people to do, and this is something that I do every day, is I just ask God, help me be aware of what's going on around me, and somebody who might need a word, or somebody who might need me to help them, because it's all the real joy and happiness in life comes from serving others and showing love to others. And there's not a lot of love that's easily flying around in our world right now. So when you are a person who is willing to give or to show love, it stands out. It's magnified because it's powerful, and you can change the trajectory of somebody's life just by, you feel a little bump in your spirit, to say something or to do something, and and how do we know how that's going to affect their life? It might change the trajectory. They may have been, heading down a path, that wasn't going to end well, but because you were willing to show them some love, or to give, or to serve, it changed their life.
That's a great advice, Chris. How can people get a hold of you? And
Sure.
if they want to,
My email is the best. My first name, Christian, and then my email is christian@emerge.pub. Emerge is our company, EMERGE, and it's .pub, not as in the bar. It's .pub as in publishing. So christian@emerge.pub. Emerge, and we're developing out a new process called Author Pro that we're on the very front end of. Over this spring, we're going to be developing out, doing some online training courses, and really just trying to help people to be able to experience their dreams. They have a dream to do this. We want to be able to give them tools to be able to do that. So you'll be seeing more from us in the area of Author Pro. That's one of my pet projects.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, for your
Yes,
time. This is
thank
just
you. I
full
enjoyed it.
from when we've been in 59 minutes, 70. It was just full of wisdom, full of information. And I know anyone who is even thinking about writing a book, just by listening to that last hour, really, they have the infrastructure to start it.
Yes.
So I really
Yeah.
appreciate you. Just hang in there 1 minute, and I'll
Sure.
let me close the show. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for listening. If you know someone who's a writer, someone who wants to write, just share this podcast with them and let them let them know, hey, this publisher, Christian Ophus was there from Emerge Publishing, and he helps. He's an advocate for authors. So why, what do you call it? Can we listen to this? So please share it, subscribe to the podcast, tell your friends about it. That's that's all we're asking you to do. So we're trying to pour wisdom into your life, so that's what you can do back for us. So thank you so much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next Tuesday at a Laughter for All podcast with a new guest. So thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.